All right, good morning. Good to have you all here right at 10 o'clock. We're going to start on time so that Mr. Tom Reese has a little bit, all the minutes possible to share his story. I don't think Tom needs any introduction to those of you that are here. He's a dear friend of mine. Love sharing coffee with him and having him as a neighbor, a fellow Midlander. And God has done amazing works in his life, and he's going to share that with us this morning. So I'm going to start with a word of prayer and then turn it over to him. Father, I thank you for this time together. I thank you for each person that is here today. Every single one of us has a story that you've had a hand in, that you have been directing throughout our lives. And Lord, today we want to celebrate Tom's story, the story that your story through the life of Tom, I guess we should say. And so I pray that you would give him words to speak, give him clarity of mind, that he could think clearly and remember what he was wanting to share. Speak through him today, Lord. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
You sure? I'm sure. This asks to be one trusting pastor to give me a microphone. It's good to see everybody. I've already gotten a hearty regates from Floyd here, so I'm very comfortable this morning. When Phil first asked me if I would do this, I wasn't sure exactly what he wanted to hear, so I asked him if he would mind doing like a Q&A. Get a prompt, answer the question. I would like to start off with the fact that June 7, June 8, and June 9 are special days for me, beyond many other special days. June 8th, today, is the 50th anniversary of my graduation from Fauquier High School. Please do not judge me. I'm not a libertarian, so to speak, but my granddaughter is. June 9, the next day in 1974, would be my first ever fire that I ran as a volunteer, the gas line explosion in Bealton. They had to give me that to start it. That was interesting. But June 7 later, 1984, 10 years into the future, was an entirely different day for me. That was the day that all this paraplegia started. And just to run up until that, I was born March 9th, 1956, at the Remington Clinic under Dr. Evan Ashby. The clinic building is still there. It's across the road from the Genesis Home Improvement Center. So later, when I married Elsie, the finest thing to happen to me in fire and rescue, right here in the front, we would buy a home in 1983 in Remington that we needed to rebuild. It was a 1905 house, but it was across the street from Genesis, and every day when I would get up and go to work, I could look across the street and see the building I was born in. It was a very interesting way to look at it. If I walked down the street a few yards and turned left, I would go to the Baptist church that I was baptized in. So it was a small town thing for me. It was my little encompassed world, so to speak. So at the age of 11, I was baptized, as I just said, and I remember the profession of faith. I remember the altar call, and I remember how I felt when I went down. I was 11. And another friend of mine, and I'll just say his name, he is deceased, Max Foster, was there with me. We went. I'm not sure if Max was there at the same time that I was, but we were baptized together later in, I think it was December of 1967 of all years. And then that led to a period of time through my life where after 1974, I started falling away from any church attendance. I would go, but not on any kind of a regular basis. That is a very long story. We don't have time for it here, involving some horrific things that happened in a case that has never actually been solved. And we could really get into some details there, but I don't really want to do that here. But I'll talk about it in another venue if we can.
1974, you said, was kind of when you started falling away.
Yes.
What age?
That would have been 18, at age 18. If you understood the mechanics of what happened in the incident that occurred at the church, or not physically in the church, but involving the church, I think you'd understand more about where I was as an 18-year-old. But the thing is, that should never have stopped me from attending somewhere else. I take the blame for that because my whole world was in those folks, and I wasn't seeing a broader picture. My small town mentality was giving me a small spirituality. Let's put it that way. My whole world, all my worlds were tiny. Okay?
So in our conversation, we had a little conversation over coffee this week. You mentioned about 3 things that were really kind of the center of your universe during those years when you 18 to early 20s.
Yeah, there were 3 things that kind of took over what I was doing. And he's right, we did have coffee earlier. I noticed today, though, that the pastor gets the nice ceramic cup. He stuck me with foam, but I'm good with it. This is the way we get along with each other. It's great. Well, first of all, my work consumed me at the 911 center. It wasn't called that then. We didn't know what 911 was yet. We were using 7-digit numbers back then. At the sheriff's office, when you dispatched, which is what I did, you dispatched the sheriff's office, but you also dispatched fire and rescue all together. You did animal control, you did game wardens, you did water authority, you did everything. We had 12 or so listing points. So I was involved there. Motorcycles took up a big part of my life, thanks to my dad, because he used to have them when he was younger too, and he liked them, and he got me hooked on them, and the next thing you know, I'm into motorcycles. I would get on and go to Skyline Drive whenever, just go and drive on it, wherever I wanted to go, just go, just to get away. And firearms consumed me because my grandpa was a hunter. They had lived next door until he died in 1962. And I've got his shotgun, by the way. My grandmother gave it to me. And so I got into that, but I got more into the antiques part of it. The stuff that nobody really wanted. They just considered it old junk at that time, and I was like, well, this is cool stuff. So that's where my world was wrapping into. Everything but the church. And this is going to sound weird, but I was not involved with any females at all. I just did not. It was not where I was. Just wasn't. All right? Elsie is the first person I ever asked out. She was my first date, and I never thought about it that I can recall until then. This was here, and I knew that this is it.
So we're going to talk more about Elsie in a minute. But you mentioned work was you loved your work. You loved what you did at the fire and rescue. Mm-hmm. You mind sharing just briefly that story you told me about the man that died, and you found something at the scene of the accident that you were able to bless his son with later?
Oh, that was the wreck on Father's Day, right? The Canadian? Yes. Okay. On Father's Day, June 18, 1978, when I had just started going out with Elsie, at the time I was in charge of the dispatching center. So I had a radio in my Bronco. I had a 76 Bronco I bought new that I could talk back and forth to the dispatch center with because that year I happened to be elected in charge of the Remington Rescue Squad. I didn't want it. I wanted the guy that had it the year before to take it, but he refused, so he was like second in command now. And I felt very awkward, but that's what we had. So I'm on the way to visit Elsie's dad on Father's Day because I know how to butter my bread, right? And we hear an accident that happened in Bealton just towards the Flying Circus entrance. And back then, that was Remington's area. Lois was just getting started. So when I got there, there was nobody else there. I was it. And the guy there was a guy in a Suburban with his family towing a big Airstream trailer from Canada headed south. He got hit head on by a Bronco like mine coming the other way because it was only 2-lane back then. The 4-lane was being built. And it basically pushed the steering wheel into the driver of the Suburban. And he did not survive that. The Bronco driver was so messed up. I mean, he was laid out flat on the ground. This is one of my best friends growing up. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know he had bought that Bronco. I did not know who he was. He was so bad shape. And when I looked down and, sir, can you hear me? And he looked at me and said, Tom. I recognized the voice, and that's how I knew him. I'm like, wow. So the death of the man that was in the truck haunted me for a long time, because everything in my head said, I'm not qualified to do this. Did I do enough? Did we do enough? I had a problem with one person who did not want to go in the ambulance with him because they would have to do compressions, and they were scared. And I had to leave the scene to do the compressions because I had nobody else, and I was supposed to stay at that scene. So I had to leave it to somebody else. So 16 years later, I had held on to a Father's Day card I had found when we had cleaned the area up, but we could never find the young man that was, that had written it. And 16 years later, thanks to Elsie's efforts by intercepting a Canadian couple we met at a hotel lobby, we were able to find this young man, because the man that she met in the hotel lobby by accident was in charge of the Canadian Social Security system, not a worker in charge of it, and he found this guy for me. So it was amazing how those things work. We still stay in contact. I'll be sending him a card this week, by the way.
Interesting story. I thought it highlights two of the characteristics of Tom. One is his attention to detail, and his he hangs on to old things, and his love for people. And the fact that they're still in touch with this young man just really speaks to your love for people. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
Go ahead and talk then a little bit about how your life changed drastically by meeting this beautiful young lady over here on the front row, and kind of that process of meeting, marrying, starting a family, and then you can go into
I will tell you my side of what I believe to be correct. You will have to ask Elsie if you want to know anything else. And I'll try to make it fast. Try it. That's a hard word for me. Sorry, Austin. I told you about the octave, right? One night when I was working evening shift, which is 4 p.m. to 12 p.m., Elsie was working her evening shift at the hospital, which was 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. So we're close. And the jailer, and I'll say his name, Artie Robinson, he's no longer with us, but he was a good friend. And he also ran rescue with Warrenton. Elsie ran rescue with Catlett. I ran fire and rescue with Remington. So we are all interconnected, and we all knew each other. And whenever back then someone was coming to the hospital in ambulance, we did not yet have radios in most part to the hospital directly. We were just getting into that. So they would call me on the radio and say, we have this, this, and this, and we'll be there in 25 minutes. Then I would call the hospital and repeat what they said word for word. Then if they had an instruction for the ambulance, I'd be writing this down on a little notepad and radioing them back word for word and say whose authority it was or whatever. And that's how we got along then. And it worked. Don't even ask me how we found where people were during an emergency call, because that was a whole different world. There was no 911 for us. So one night I missed a class that we both were taking for cardiac, for ambulance calls. And she called me out of the blue. And Artie was working the desk behind me where the jail was, and he heard the call come in, and she said, hey, I saw you missed the class. I've got notes. You want me to bring them by? I'd be glad to bring you a copy of the notes for the class, which was great. And I said, yes, absolutely, thank you. And so when I hung up, the jailer said, who was that? I said, Elsie Byler. What did she want? And I told him, and he goes, boy, that's really nice. You ought to ask her out. It was that blunt. You ought to ask her out. I had never done this. I said, I can't do that. Why not? I said, well, she's one of those, like, the Mennonites there in Catlett or something. I said, I think they can only date each other. See, I didn't know. And he says, do you know that for sure? I said, no. He says, want me to check it? Well, okay. And so he pretends like he's on the phone to the emergency room, because they had already set this up, and I didn't know it. If you get an opportunity, trigger him, was apparently Artie's orders. So he was triggering. He says, "You have no problem." I said, "Oh, okay." So she's coming up, and then here she is. He says, "I'll take the radio," and he runs in there and grabs the radio and says, "I can do it. Go outside." So I did, and it took me, I don't know, 15 or 20 minutes to ask. I was shaking like a leaf, and I finally asked her, and the rest is history. We went out from then on.
That is interesting. Wow. So, got married. Go ahead and go on into that.
Well, Elsie wanted to go and get a nursing degree. So, she was working more or less as an aide at the hospital in the ER at the time. So she got an appointment to a college in Roanoke, a 3-year program, which back then was popular. And so she went. About broke my heart, but I would get off, no joke. We did switch arounds on shift work at the sheriff's office. It never was always the same. 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. I would get off at midnight and drive to Roanoke, 180 miles one way, and pick her up. And I'd get there around 3:30 in the morning or something, or maybe 3 in the morning, and have to turn around and come straight back to do my 8 o'clock startup for work the next morning. Drop her off in Catlett and go. And we would do that, and I did that willingly, but I was a whole lot younger too. So understand that the Bronco I had a 12-gallon gas tank at that time with 12 to 13 miles per gallon, and I was going 180 miles in the middle of the night. So I had to really look for fuel and make sure that I had it back then. So we did get married May 26, 1979. First daughter, Jennifer, June 4, 1980, and the son, Tom, November 6, 1981. And that's October 83, we bought the house in Remington. We were remodeling it, and we were remodeling into 1984.
So you met Elsie while you were still kind of far from God, not really walking closely with the Lord?
Yes, and when I met her, I saw an entirely different world, an entirely different, I hate to say an entirely different people, because I'm not trying to mislabel anyone, but I was seeing a faith that was so deep from what I saw, and a family, a large family, a very large family, as a matter of fact, a very large family, but they could work together, which is really what I would love to have had. But there were only 4 of us in my family as well. And my sister was 7 years, and is 7 years older than me, so we didn't hang out a lot. So most of my friendship was with people on the street that, we were in the same town. She had a complete family she could hang out with. I didn't have that, so I hung out with her family. Man, I thought I had heaven. But she was already going to Peabody Street Mennonite Church in D.C. every Sunday. And Leroy and Rhonda were too. Her brother Leroy and his future wife Rhonda, they were going as well. And so I started going, and I started getting an entirely different, what I call indoctrination into the faith, where it didn't go deep like it didn't go as relational as it should at that moment, but it was reconfirming the belief that I had, and it was strengthening it. And I was starting to see church community, but I still didn't fully understand the concept of that yet, but I was getting there, and she's why.
Well, that's neat. So go ahead and you can go on into that big event that happened soon after your second child was born, or a few years later.
Well, we eventually wound up at EMC, Eastern Mennonite College in Harrisonburg. She dropped out of the 3-year, went into the 4 when she was counseled to do so. That was the correct counseling, by the way, very good counseling. And so we moved to Harrisonburg so that she could be in EMC, but they didn't have jobs like I was used to doing. I couldn't find anything involving communications or whatever. It was all taken. So there was a truck driving job open for what is called Cisco. Many of you may have heard of it. It's still in business. And so I took it. And they couldn't get anyone to take the Richmond route. Everybody wanted to deliver local mom and pop. They didn't want to go to the city. So they asked me, "Hey, you're from up there. You think you could do that?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? 2.5 hours down on the clock just driving it there." and 2.5 hours on the clock just bringing it back, and then almost forklift loads unloading stuff, and you're done. Yeah, I'll take it. So that worked out pretty good. But eventually, we made a move back to Catlett with our children. And when I came back, the sheriff had told me, listen, if you ever come back, your job is here. You got to tell me when you're back. So I called him, and this was like November 28th or something. He said, can you start December 2? Or just, yeah, December 2, I think it was. Yes. Oh, I'll see you there. So I went back. He says, oh, by the way, there's another job I want you to take, in addition to what you're doing. And I said, okay, what's that? He said, we need a jail, like an EMT in the back. Somebody that works with inmates, checks them out, screens them, makes sure they're medically okay. And if they get sick, help them out, work with the doctor. Old Doc Dillinger was in charge. And I'm like, yeah, I can do that. He said, now I can get you a little more pay for it, but you're going to have to do both. Okay. So I wound up finding equipment and stuff that we could put in there, and I thought we had improved it, and I had to go every so many months to Waynesboro, Virginia, to a college for a correctional nurses training course. Lasted a couple days. And so on June 6, 84, which was actually Elsie's dad's 48th birthday, I took off on a motorcycle and headed to Waynesboro. And so that night, I made a call back to her, and she says, Tom, you need to be careful tomorrow when you come home. She says, please be careful. One of her friends at the emergency room and her boyfriend, who were on a bike, got struck by a UPS truck near Warrenton Lakes up in Warrenton, and they were not in good shape. And she was scared. And I said, and I still remember saying it, Elsie, you know me, I'll be careful, right? So she said, okay. So the next day I headed home, and now it is, I just checked my dashboard clock. I was headed up 29. I stopped at Charlottesville first, got what I call my last supper before the paraplegia. No one's going to want to guess it, but it was a Pepsi and a Hostess Snowball. You know, you used to get those at 7-Eleven. Boy, what a way to eat a great meal before the wreck. I got just past the Tasty Freeze. I checked my dashboard clock. It said 5 o'clock. I was supposed to be at the Catlett Fireman's Parade at 7. That's when we celebrate Elsie's dad's birthday and my daughter's at the same day. I had 45 miles to go, and I had 2 hours to do it in. And for the first time in my life, I felt I'd be on time. I remember thinking that, I'm going to be on time. And I saw this yellow Chevrolet Nova pull up and stop at 2:30 and 29 just near Yoder's. And I saw the person look my way with glasses. I knew they had glasses. And then I looked ahead, I looked in the mirror, I looked ahead, nothing's going on. And something said, look to the right. And I did, and it was already, because she was already coming out. There was nowhere to go. So I made that kind of a motion, but it was too late. So that resulted in T4 paraplegia right here. So anything below there, can't feel it, can't move it. Broke both wrists on both sides, broke the left elbow, crushed the left hip, and T3, 4, 5, and all in one swipe.
So after this happened, you find yourself in the hospital interacting with lots of people. Your wife mentioned that there was something that changed in you right over that time.
Yeah. I was a month before Pegasus. They didn't have a helicopter yet, so they just ambulanced me in, which was, we're used to doing that. I don't remember the first 5 hours of it. I do remember that the ambulance people made copious notes that I talked a lot because I knew them and they knew me. And the one of the women EMTs on board was my doctor's wife. It's a small world. And so when I got there, I was in and out of ICU 2 or 3 times total. She knows the number better than I do on that. But several people have said, and she had told me once that she said, you were just telling people about the Lord. You just told people about the Lord. And you were thinking God, he got you through it. That kind of thing. And I recall that. It was like like a moment where someone needed something and you just said it, well, if it wasn't for the Lord, I'd have never gotten out of this. I wouldn't be here. And I did struggle psychologically. I did have some struggles. It wasn't all perfect, believe me. I had some hard times laying in bed thinking about all this. But I got transferred across the street to an intermediate rehab center. And it's noon. They make you lay down. There was no choice. They want the pressure off of you so you don't build up sores on your behind, your legs, and everywhere else. So they make you lay down, and it's really eerily quiet on the second floor, I believe is what we were on. And I heard a voice say clearly, everything is going to be all right, or okay. Everything is going to be okay. And I remember going, what did you say? Because you have to understand how trussed up I was. I couldn't just look around like that. It didn't work that way. Everything was locked in place. And I, again, what did you say? Hey, who are you? What did you say? And no response. So I could push the call bell, and I did. And here comes, she goes, yes. I says, what did you just tell me? She goes, I didn't say anything to you. I was up at the desk. I said, well, who just walked by my door just now? No one. There's no one else up here. No one. There is no one here at all. And the people in the rooms couldn't walk. So I knew it wasn't them, right? So the only conclusion we got was that was the Lord talking to me that day and giving me the assurance in a way that I understood that everything was going to be okay. And that didn't mean I was going to walk again. It just means I would get through it, and he would get me through it. I understood that part of it later. I didn't understand it right that second, but I was getting it because I told her about it. She's like, wow. So hopefully that helps.
So it kind of turned you into an immediate evangelist when this all happened, and it really drew you closer to God, would you say, during this time?
It did. The platform was there. It still is in many ways, but the relationship with the Lord was not there where it really needed to be, because although I did, like a lot of people, I did not read the Bible cover to cover. Big mistake. And when I read it, I didn't study it. Big mistake. So I could maybe quote some verses that everybody else on earth can quote, but maybe didn't fully understand exactly what I was quoting. Big mistake. But I knew how to help people, which I knew Jesus did. And that was what I like to do, was help people. And what I didn't understand is that giving them the word of the Lord is helping them in ways that physical health can never do. Giving a good spiritual word can do far more than any physical health can do, depending on the need. Both is even more better, right? But I hadn't gotten to that relationship level. Later, Elsie started doing precept ministry studies through Kay Arthur, who just passed the other day, not long ago. And we do them here, over in the conference room. Usually it's a Tuesday in the morning. And so around 2004 is when I started getting involved with doing some of the reading of these books. I went with her to a class in Warrenton. I liked it. We wound up doing them, I think, at home first, one course, I think. But then we came here. And then I started studying the Word instead of reading the Word. Like I had thought I already knew it. No, not till I started studying it. And then I would study it later again and get something brand new out of it. I thought, wait a minute, I just studied this 2 years ago, and it meant that, and I got it, and I've been using it, and it's awesome. And now it's not just that, it also is this. It's not weird, it's just kind of, it's almost frightening that I had hid that in my heart and didn't understand it. But I guess God said, you know what, now you can stand it, so I'm going to release it to you. Here you go. New meaning, same verse. But don't lose the old one. I'm not telling you to lose the old one, but here's a new meaning. You're ready. Now, are you going to give it to somebody else? See, that's the problem. I was holding everything in here. Now, I wasn't really sharing it out. And I didn't mean that to slight anybody. It's just that I wasn't doing it. I'm just being honest with that. Now I get prompts. And I mean, I get prompts. I'll be in a store and I don't have time to go over and pray for somebody, but I'll see somebody and I'm told, go over there and pray for them. Excuse me? Don't say excuse me. You know what I said. I told you earlier you'd be okay, and you acted like you didn't know who said it. So I'm telling you to go over there and pray for them. It's almost that clear. And so when I don't, and there have been moments that I didn't, I always have a nagging feeling in my head, what did I miss? Because I didn't. What would have been the impact? I won't know here. But when I do, it always works out so well. I have never had anyone try to push me away, yell, scream, get away from me, you crazy Christian. I don't want, you people are crazy. You're our problem anyway. Get out of my life. That's never happened. Generally, they say yes, and I'll ask them, do you have anything you want me to pray for? I don't just pray generically. And if they don't, then I'll give them a generic. But sometimes they'll say, nah, I'm good. That's usually almost literally word for word. Nah, I'm good. Okay, well, the only good one's God. But I will tell them, okay, well, I don't know. I sure did get a prompt to do it. Would you mind if I just say something? I don't think I've ever heard anyone say no. If it was maybe once, maybe, but I don't think so. They will let you do it. And all I can pray is that maybe a seed's been planted. I don't know. Or maybe a seed's been planted in me also. I don't know.
So as a paraplegic, there are some things that you can't do, some ministry things you can't do. But praying for people seems to be one you can do.
Well, tell me what I can't do. No, I'm being facetious. Anyone can pray. If you can think, if you're conscious, you can pray. If you don't know how to pray, the Bible clearly says, ask the Holy Spirit to intercede for you and pray for you. Say your prayer. I've gotten to that point. That I just don't know what to pray. But yes, I can do that. And I will do what I can physically do. And there are some things I've been able to do, some things, but not a lot. It's limited by this thing. You can imagine being in one. I will tell you, yesterday, though, we were in an area that we had to access the van on a very steep area, and I was far more physically capable doing that than a certain female I had taken with me, I think. We got her a golf cart to get her up there a couple times. But it was a hard climb. But I got to be careful because there are 10,000 things she can do that I can't physically. So, yes, I need to focus on what I can do, and that is prayer. I can still somewhat write, and occasionally I can speak if someone will allow it.
Well, I'm glad that you have been faithful in doing what God has called you to do, the ministry that God has given you, even in this, in the state that you find yourself. You're a very, very effective minister of the word.
Well, I appreciate it. I will tell you, sitting right there is the reason that I feel that I am here today to be able to say what I'm saying. Because if we had not gotten together, I don't know where I would have been. I don't know. Only God knows that. No one can tell you that. But I know she was a catalyst that spurred the faith walk that I'm on. And although there was earlier, it wasn't to the degree until I met her. And I will give glory also to Kay Arthur's ministry precepts, because that thing is awesome. And because she got in it, the combination of them, and the Lord said, look, I got resources. Look at this. And he knew I liked those kind of things. He knew I liked her. And I liked reading. Combination.
Well, you've been pretty prompt at moving through this pretty well. We still have 5 to 7 minutes, so would you care to share a little bit what the accident, how it impacted maybe your family, your wife, your children,
Well, after the accident, Elsie will tell you, I will say very quickly, my boss, the sheriff of Fauquier, who at that time was Ashby Ollinger, was right there. He was right there. And he had his second in charge, Warren Jenkins, with him. Now, understand these are two people I had grown up with, but they were my sister's era, all right? But they knew me as Little Tom, right? He was right there. And they went to her, and she explained my concerns to them about not being able to drive anymore, and my work, it's going to mess up. I probably can't do that anymore. He was Ashby. They were right there, and the first thing he said was, "We don't want you to worry about work because whether you roll in or walk in, you're going back. Your job's secured. Don't worry about your job." Ooh, wow. I mean, to a guy that's like 28-year-old dad of two. That's important. The other thing was driving. They said, well, at the time, although it was in reruns, and you can still see it on some old TV shows, Ironside was a big TV show where Raymond Burr, Perry Mason, played a paraplegic who was shot by a guy that he had convicted and put in jail and had gotten out. And he had a wheelchair with a lift. And I remember seeing the show, but it just kind of went over my head. I just thought it's kind of neat, but I don't need anything like it, but it's neat. What I didn't know is that I would have the same outfit pretty much by the same manufacturer all those years later. And she said that to me. Remember Ironside? And I'm like, I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, there is a way to drive. Because I thought I was going to lose my employment and my ability to drive. And I had gained both of them back. Because two people told me, well, what about this? So that's a lot. That's a lot. Reassurance to a person after an injury is tremendous. Confronting their initial fears is tremendous. But telling them, don't worry, it's possible. You may walk again when they know that it's physically impossible. You don't want to do too much reassurance. Well, it's possible you may walk again because it wasn't going to be. But at the time, I was uncompliant in believing that. And I told everybody I would. And my dad had told me, well, you get up and walk again, I'm buying you any Harley Davidson you want. Wow. That was an incentive to a young guy, but it wasn't going to happen. It didn't happen. My children, I had to rethink how I did things with them. I couldn't just go out and play like I did. Jennifer was 4. Tom was about a year and a half, or so. And I couldn't just play with them the way I did. So I had to be a little creative with some things. But I still went to their ball games and their recitals or their parades or whatever it was they were involved in. I tried to stay involved as much as I could be. At work, it was a problem because of the way the controls and stuff in there were set up. So Woodrow Wilson Rehab, which no longer does the work for spinal injuries like they did, they had a brand new tractor-trailer laboratory set up to go and do mobile modifications at work or home. They had never used it. They had been using an old camper and staying at hotels. This thing had a sleeper and a kitchen and everything. So I was job one. So they showed up one day, and that afternoon they were gone. They came in and said, what do you need us to do? I need this to be here, that to be here, and that here so I can reach it. Okay. And they did it all, and they were gone. And I went in there, and I'm like, wow, it was absolutely perfect. But unexpected benefit, everybody else sped up because they no longer had to jump up and down out of chairs to reach switches and throw contacts and get microphones. It was all right there for them. And somebody made the comment, do you know you sped us all up when they modified it for you? Well, I never thought of that. But yeah, so there was an unexpected benefit to the injury. And then the years would go by and like, how are you going to walk your daughter down the aisle? We made it work. I was on a roll. And I got to, I actually got to have a first father-in-law dance with my daughter-in-law. I had it. It really did happen. That's another story you'd have to see to believe. But, and Elsie was instrumental in helping the engineer that we could make that work correctly without somebody getting hurt or falling off. But my family, some of them were a little, I think, maybe a little bit intimidated by it because it's so new. And this family never really had to deal with this kind of paraplegia stuff before. Neither had mine. So sometimes they were a little shy about asking questions. And I got to a point where it's ask away. I don't care. If you have a question, I'll answer it. I would rather someone know than not know about this. Like, what do we really need to help you with that? No, because I can still pick it up. Sometimes it's that simple. So don't be afraid. If you have a question about all this that you want to ask, just ask. And if I don't want to answer it, I'll tell you I don't want to answer it, but I'm too embarrassed not to answer it, so I'll answer it. It's the way I do.
So does anybody have a question for Tom? About his whole story, actually.
So I was wondering, financially, were you on workman's comp when you were you at work? I was in and out, but it seemed like you might have been on duty when you were driving.
Pretty perceptive. Very perceptive. Yes, we were on duty because we were at a scheduled meeting. What they did not do back then was give you a motor vehicle to drive to it with. You had to take your own. And then you just claim mileage for it, which one would you go down on, a Bronco with 12 miles to a gallon or a motorcycle with 50? And you're a young guy, do the math on that one, right? And it's a beautiful June day, so I take the bike. And so on the way back, I did not know that I was under workers' comp at the initial phase of the injury, but you got to understand what I was psychologically, where I was, when all this started. And then the sheriff is the one that came in and said, you don't have to worry, this is covered under workman's comp. Told Elsie that. She knew right away. And that was like, we had no clue. We just thought, oh, here we go, how are we going to do all this? We're going to lose our home? What's going to happen? No, we didn't. Now, you need to understand, just because it's under workman's comp doesn't mean that I have a millionaire's ride to everything. It doesn't work that way all the time. They don't pay everything, and they will fight you on paying some things. And if they've already given you something, but it wears out and you need to replace it, sometimes they will really fight you on it. But all you have to do is have it justified and prove what you've done with it and what you do with it, and you can usually make it work out pretty good. But there are occasional fights with it, but overall they've been very good to us. They've been very good to us. So, and my dad in the beginning, we didn't understand for sure exactly what was going to happen. So my dad was instrumental in helping me secure that first van and lift and getting that set up. Workers' comp did the lift. Dad, you need to understand, in the state of Virginia, the van is me. The equipment is them. All right? So when I don't just get a free vehicle. I get free equipment to make it work for me, yes, but I have to buy the vehicle. So, I'm still looking for income. I still look for income. I can't just sit back and do zero. So.
All right. Well, this was very, very inspiring. I really enjoyed hearing the story. I am thankful that part of your story, your path, led you to be a part of the family here at Day Spring. We love having you. I would recommend, if you'd like to hear more, buy him a coffee, and you will get much more detail on all of these little tidbits that you got today. There is a lot more that you could get. So if you take him to Panera, you don't have to pay for his coffee because he gets free coffee at Panera.
Yeah. That is absolutely literally true. I will say you need to understand how fortunate you are here as a church with the elder board you have, with the ushers, everybody that does all the work, with Bruce, with Phil. I'm sorry, Pastor Bruce, Pastor Phil. You are very blessed, probably farther than you know. He has been a good friend to me. Bruce has been a good friend to me, and many others here as well have been good friends to me. You have no idea to a paraplegic how much that means to have somebody that says you're their friend. Because a lot of people are scared to death to be near anyone in a wheelchair because they're going to catch it. This isn't catching unless you make a mistake on a motor vehicle the wrong way or possibly fall off of a tractor, or there's all kinds of ways to get this.
All right. Thank you very much. You're dismissed, and we can see you back in here in about 10 minutes.